Okay, you want to start?
All right, Chuck.
Oh, okay, good. So welcome everybody. My name is Chuck Cohen. I'm one of the two managing directors of Benco Dental. I am very pleased to welcome everybody today to this very exciting program. We're going to spend 1 hour focused only on the needs, desires, and knowledge of dental assistants. We love dental assistants. Dental assistants are key to the dental experience, and we are very glad to have with us today 5 of the best. So what we're going to do is welcome everybody. Let's everyone wave to make sure everyone's video is still working. That's awesome. What we'd like to do is we'd like to go around and have everyone introduce themselves, and then we have a few topics that we wanted to talk about, and then we do have a place for people to put in questions and answers. So at the bottom of the screen, if this shouldn't be new to anybody for the last 4 or 5 weeks, or 12 weeks, all we've been doing is Zoom calls, it seems. There's a place where it says Q&A. So if anybody has any questions, please enter them in the Q&A. I see Rhonda and Tia already have fans who have entered in. Hi, Rhonda and Tia. Lori Owens says that. So yay. So somebody has found it. So if you have questions, put them there, and we will get around to asking and answering. If there are unanswered questions at the end, we will get back to everybody with official answers to those questions. Please don't use the chat window. The chat window will not be monitored, and that's only for chatting between the participants. So welcome everybody. Glad you're here. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rhonda Holman. Rhonda, if you can introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the practice where you are and your own experience as an assistant.
Absolutely. As you guys know, my name is Rhonda Holman. I will be 21 years in my career field this fall. And I was Air Force trained, kind of like John, which you guys will find out in a minute. Sorry, I ruined that for him, but we're both Air Force. And let's see, I worked for a single dentist, general practice. And so my dentist was a dental assistant. Then she went to hygiene school, became a dental hygienist, and then went back to school to become a dentist. So I am one of the most blessed dental assistants to have like the perfect team and the perfect doctor. I work in Carlston, Montana, and I'm one of the co-hosts with Jules Varney on DA Rockstars podcast.
Fabulous. Thank you, Rhonda. Erin, could you introduce yourself also?
Absolutely. My name is Erin Hendricks. I am a dental assistant practicing with a prosthodontist in Washington, D.C. And surprise to Rhonda and John, I was also Air Force trained. I am the president of the Maryland Dental Assistants Association, and I have been practicing for 33 years, and I absolutely love being a dental assistant. I can't tell you how much I love this position. It's great.
Excellent. So there's 3 of you, and by the end, we will ask you all to sing the Air Force fight song.
All right.
There will be extra points for those who remember it, and those who don't remember it will get something at the end. We're not sure. Tia,
all right.
Could you introduce yourself?
I would love to. My name is Tia Hunter. I've been a dental assistant for 39 years, and I work in a practice in O'Fallon, Missouri, which is a suburb of St. Louis. We have 7 operatories, 2 wonderful doctors, a team of 16, general practice, and I've been with my doctor 17 years today. I'm chairside assistant and office manager.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you, Tia. Kathy?
Yes. My name is Kathy Carlston. I have been in dentistry since some of these beautiful people were on the planet. Pushing 4 years. So I have seen, wow, a lot go on in our profession. Dental assisting has come from one end to the other. And I'm currently not practicing. Arthritis has taken toll on my hands. And so I don't sit chairside anymore, but I love this profession and what it provides for patients. My husband and I started an educational company focusing specifically on implants. And so I've really been in implant dentistry since I had the pleasure of working with Dr. Carl Misch back in the late 80s and into the early 90s and 2000s. So I have been focused on a lot of what we're going to be talking about today in the operatory and in the treatment rooms. So with that, I'm currently in Minnesota and enjoying it up here. And so I'll pass it back to you, Chuck. Thanks for the intro.
Thank you, Kathy. That's great. Welcome. And John?
Yes, thank you. Thanks again for having me on. My name is John Hatfield. I currently live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I work at the VA hospital here. We have one of the largest facilities in the country as far as VAs go. We have 19 operatories and about 30 staff members. We have all specialties except for ortho. So every day is it's quite an adventure there. So Air Force trained, and my recruiter pretty much picked this for me. I just said I need something that I can use as a skill set. And after my ASVAB testing, this is what they lined me up with. And obviously the test must work, because 25 years later, I'm still do it and still love it.
Well, I'm not sure what will come out of our program today, but what I would say is it's so exciting to spend time with 5 people who so much love what they do, that I find that inspiring. And I'm with you guys. I've never been a chairside dental assistant, but I've met a lot of dental assistants who love what they do, and and it just makes all the difference in the world. So thank you for doing what you do, and thank you very much for loving what you do, because it's so, so important. So let's just get right into it. I think the first question that a lot of people want to understand is, what are you doing about the PPE requirements? And how does a dental assistant handle things if maybe they can't find what they need, or they have a doctor who might be reluctant to invest in some of the programs or equipment that the office needs? So John, if you want to start that off a little bit, how are you guys doing on the government side? And then we'll kick it over to somebody from the general dentist side.
Well, the government dental side, it's definitely a struggle, just like everyone else. We have one N95 mask, and of course we're getting a lot of, I'm going to say misinformation, because who knows what's really right. They have us putting it in a paper bag and writing down the days and times of how often we're using it. Then, we're told, keep it for 12 hours, keep it for 20 hours, keep it until it's visibly soiled, wear a level 3 on top of it. So that's pretty much it. As far as the supplies, that seems to be the biggest discrepancy. We're still okay with gowns. We're still okay with, they got us shields, but the VA operates on a higher level as far as standard of care, because we're still seeing emergencies only. We still are not up and running. So our need for the supplies isn't there yet either. And speaking to some of the supervisors there, they're saying that they're not even sure when dentistry is going to resume in a VA facility, because they're so concerned with everything else, with the big picture, with surgeries. So dental, like everything else, dental kind of gets put on the back burner.
Got it. Erin, how about you? From the perspective of the prosthodontist office in DC, how are you guys doing about procuring the PPE you need and making sure that everybody stays safe?
Well, I happen to work in a practice where we followed guidelines given in the late 80s, early 90s, where we always wore face shields, we always had level 3 masks, we always had the disposable gowns like the one I'm wearing, and we have absolutely no problem with PPE. I'm guessing one of the very few dental offices that have an ample supply, including N95 masks, only because we had a system set up, an ordering system set up, that these supplies were delivered to us on a regular basis. So during the shutdown, or during us only seeing emergencies, those auto deliveries continued. So we were able to stockpile a lot of the PPE. So when we became, when we got the green light to open and do non-elective treatment, actually this past Monday, we were all set and ready to go. Not a single team member felt unsafe. We all got our training, and as far as the PPE goes, one thing I will say, it's really beneficial to have really great personal relationships with your suppliers. We have suppliers, reps actually, who would come in on certain days of the week to visit. And I know a lot of offices, they got to kind of get shooed away, but I always make it a point to talk to whomever comes in, and that relationship paid off in that we weren't put on the back burner when it came to our auto delivery of supplies. We kept getting our supplies, and I will say, thankfully, again, because we've always practiced a lot of what is now being sort of implemented, we are perfectly fine with PPE, not a problem whatsoever.
So Rhonda, from your perspective, first of all, what are you doing in your office? And pivot a little bit, what kind of advice do we have on the panel around those assistants who may not be lucky enough to work in an office like what Erin referred to, where you don't have doctors, they may have doctors who are not as focused on this issue, or maybe there's a disagreement between the assistant and the doctor as far as what the right thing to do is.
Right. And, it's all guidelines at this point. I mean, nothing's mandated by, there's not a governing body saying you cannot do this. And so a lot of times, like my doctor, for instance, she's expressed that she appreciates these safety implements, but doesn't desire to wear them. So, I mean, I know you can work for certain dentists that might think it's overkill, and those that, think that your safety, if you don't want to wear it as a dental assistant, and your doctor says, this is what you wear if you're working here, like there's a little bit of, probably different views. But I think, like with our practice, my doctor is very eco-friendly. So she doesn't want to fill landfills, is kind of what she says all the time. And so we're doing the washable scrub tops instead of the disposable type. We all do have a Montana mask, which our MDA actually gave us per dentist in the state. We all got 5. So there's 5 masks per office per dentist. And they do have like the N95 filters that you can put in them. So they're a 3D printed mask that you can wipe off. I have my own N95 mask that I bought to the practice. And then we just wear, a regular level 3 on top just to preserve the exterior portion of it. But other than that, we're changing scrubs at work. You don't leave and anything contaminated. Shoes stay there. We come home, showers. I mean, we're just practicing smart, but I don't think we're taking it to a level where, we're not wearing a full suit and, concerned. I think if, the CDC mandated it or said that you can't practice dentistry, but I feel comfortable and safe at work with those protocols.
So Rhonda really identified something that I think we all would say is true. At this point, the CDC/ADA have given more guidelines than requirements. I mean, there's some sort of debate around that, but in general, I don't think that anyone is risking arrest or the closure of their practice, because there's a lot of professional sort of latitude in what the dentists and the professionals can decide to do. That said, how, Rhonda, you and then maybe Tia, how would you handle, or how would you coach someone who's watching this call on how to talk to their doctor about this issue, assuming that maybe they're not on the same page as far as what the practice should be doing?
Right. I mean, well, all you can do is communicate. I mean, that's the basis to any business, especially a small business. My dentist, she asks me every day, do you feel safe? Do you feel safe? So if there is a concern, there's always an open table. Like, I'm not going to get criticized if I don't feel safe. Like, and I think a good dentist, a good boss is going to take that into consideration and say, what can I do to make you feel safe? And, if I express that, I don't feel comfortable doing this without a face shield, or, I ran out of my N95 mask, what do we do now? I want to be a productive employee for you, but I also, I have a compromised immune system, or I have small kids at home or elderly parents, and I don't want to be that source that brings them anything home.
Sure.
So communication,
Yeah. And Tia, how about you from your perspective? How about what advice do you have for people?
She's absolutely right. Communication is a key. We have to talk to our employers, our office managers. I get on Facebook and in these dental assistant, pages that I love to go to and help answer questions. And so many times the dental assistants are going there for answers. And that's not where the answers are. The answers are in your own practice. And there's so much misinformation out there about what you need. And, I think that you need to speak to your employer. You need to bring up your concerns. It's something that you should do together. And you need to feel safe. And truly, I believe that our practices are the safest places around because of our PPE, because of our disinfectants. So, but you need to feel safe. And as an employer, you want your patients to, you want your people to feel safe. You want your dental assistants to be, and your hygienist and your front office, you want them to feel confident and comfortable coming into the practice, because if they don't, your patients aren't going to feel confident and comfortable. So, you know, those conversations need to happen, and they need to happen within your practice.
Got it. And Kathy, what do you have? What can you add to this as a person who is not chairside now, but with all the experience that you have? How would you go about having that conversation? I think it's easy for us. It's easy for us to say have that conversation, but maybe it's hard for some people to do it. So what kind of tips can we give to have that conversation productively?
Well, first of all, I think empathy is first and foremost in our thought process, especially when we are communicating. And I want to take it to a level above communication. It's really about connection. Would you all agree that it's about connecting with our patients and connecting? Because we can communicate all the time and never get our message across. So it's really about connecting with our patients. And, you know, I go back to what Erin was saying about guidelines that have been in effect since the late 80s, or I should say mid 80s, based on the HIV scare that we went through back then. I mean, prior to that, we as assistants were handling, you know, amalgam with our fingertips, no gloves, no mask, only on special occasions. We would stand with our hands in people's mouths for up to 7 minutes doing a rubber-based impression. The things that we didn't even have a second thought about. But I was introduced in the past few months, I was introduced to something that's been there for quite some time. So I was reintroduced to what's called the hierarchy of controls. And it's a system, which systems are great, but systems are also run by people. Mm-hmm. So the hierarchy of control actually has PPE as the last guard against, you know, cross-contamination. Mm-hmm. You know, the first hierarchy is the elimination of it. Mm-hmm. Meaning, are we fielding our patients before they come in? Are we asking the proper questions as to where they have been in the world? Have they been around anyone ill? Have you been traveling? Have we been in those positions? I think sometimes as healthcare providers, we are the worst offenders of going to work sick. So that is a behavior change that we're all going to have to really look at. The second layer of the hierarchy is substitution. If we have, what are we doing to create a place for the hazard if it has to be coming into our practice? In other words, what are we doing to separate ourselves from that? And the third is the engineering controls. Are we isolating it within the practice? I remember, you know, we've been the last 20 years taking down the walls between our patients and our reception areas. And we've been getting rid of the plexiglass and the little hole that we talked through. Now we're reinstalling a lot of that stuff. We're reconfiguring our clinics to look more like a dental practice and not like somebody's front room when we think about those things. And then, of course, the administrative controls. What are the standard operating procedures that we have in place? And who's responsible for those standard operating procedures? Do we have someone who is, I mean, I can see where an infection or an infection coordinator is, you know, a position now in a practice.
So I was just going to say, so that gets me to something that I wanted to talk about, Kathy, which is great, which is we've been advocating that every office needs a safety czar. I don't like the word infection control, even infection person, because it sounds like it's the wrong end of it. But have you guys, has everyone appointed someone to be the safety czar in your office? And does everyone know who that person is? It might be a doctor, might be an assistant, but building on what Kathy said, and the administrative side is so important. So have you guys all done that? And if so, who have you chosen and what has that person done now over the last few weeks to kind of get the office ready to do dentistry in the new normal. So I think what Kathy's saying is exactly right. So John, start with you because you're in the government side. I would assume that the government has all this worked out already with all the regulations and stuff. So from your perspective, who is the safety czar?
We actually have our hygienist who's, since I've been there, 4+ years now, she's always been the safety go-to. So, but, for the last 3 months, we've actually been detailed out to screen people coming into the hospital for COVID. So
Wow.
they actually only kept a couple assistants back with the dentist to handle the emergencies. So, as far as I know, she's still in charge of safety, but with all these new regulations, they haven't even been utilizing her for that. So, as far as the coordination and the updates, being government, we await the official word from everybody up top.
Right. So from the perspective of Tia, Erin, and Rhonda, raise your hand if you have a safety czar in your office. And okay, so one does. Is it you, Erin?
It actually is. And the
Oh,
reason
that's good. So not only do you have one, it's you. Excellent. So talk a little bit about how exciting that role is.
Well, I'll tell you how exciting it is. So as far as I know, offices are supposed to have OSHA training every year.
Yes.
And so with that, your training, your manual should indicate who your OSHA person is, who your OSHA representative or czar is. And so it's been me, only because number one, being chair side, I have sort of a view of what's going on in the back, and I'm able to inform the administrative team about what the safety protocols are, what they mean, why they're in place. And so I've always been the OSHA coordinator in the office. And before this, we had annual training with an outside person who comes in and gives us training. We take a test and get a certificate. But even throughout the year before, he comes for the annual training, we're always getting some kind of a little OSHA tidbit here, a little reminder there. And in my opinion, in every office, there should be an OSHA coordinator. In the last few weeks, what I've done is I've had to have Zoom meetings with people who weren't in the office just to update them, sift through all this information, and update them on how we're going to use the information that is pertinent to our practice and how we're going to put it to use. And again, most of what is being recommended, we've already been doing. So it's just a refresher, just a reminder that, hey guys, we've always been doing really well, and let's just keep it up. And here's a few extra things for this particular outbreak that we're going to implement. So like we've always had something we've done during the winter for flu season, because no one wants to catch the flu, no one wants to catch a cold, I make a joke that you don't want tooth dandruff on you no matter what. So we've always had an OSHA coordinator, and we've always had updates, especially every year. So for us, it was really fantastic. And I know it sounds like I work in the dream dental office, doesn't it? Sounds like I work in fantasy dental practice. And actually, I really do, because the doctors really value the team. They really value the care that we're giving to patients. We want to make sure that we're not only being compliant, but going above and beyond that to make sure that everybody's safe. Everybody goes home feeling very confident about the treatment they just received and about the treatment we just rendered. So for our office, yes, absolutely, 100%.
And thank you, Erin. And Tia and Rhonda, I saw Rhonda sort of went like this with her hand. I'm not quite sure what that means. Sounds to me like there's somewhat of a little bit, and Tia didn't. So Rhonda, why don't you go first? Have you talked in your office about appointing a safety czar? And by the way, before you answer the question, I'm a firm believer that, with all due respect to what Erin said, I like the name safety czar better than safety coordinator, because I think it sends this message that the czar is empowered. And when it comes to safety, this is my own belief, I'm a believer that not only does someone have to have safety in their title, but just saying coordinator, not that Erin isn't a strong personality, but when we in the office say, this is our czar, that means that when that person decides they want to be in charge, meaning, hey, there's something in the office that's unsafe, that becomes a priority. We're not just in charge of coordinating safety, we're in charge of making sure the entire office is as safe as it can be, and we meet all the regulations. So that's my own bias. For what it's worth, I like this idea of, yeah, you're like empowered. So Rhonda, how do you work this in your office, and what have you guys decided to do?
So, my doctor, being a past dental assistant, she kind of took on that role of being the safety czar. I am I bring information in as I receive it. So I am kind of like a funnel and she's the filter. So, as I get reports come in and I look at the PubMeds, I give it to her and then we implement it down that way.
That's awesome. Good. Well, and you're on it. And Tia, what about you? What have you done in your office?
Well, in my office, in my practice, we have an OSHA coordinator, which is one of our hygienists, but I'm the infection control coordinator. So we have split that up, two very different things, and so that we can each help each other, but kind of do what we need to do separately. Protocols for me are huge. And so, having those protocols and being able to have the team on the same page so that everybody knows what's going on, that's important to me. So, just being ready and kind of like Erin,
Yeah.
that this was coming, and we kept ordering supplies. So the entire shutdown, we were ordering supplies. So we're good with supplies. We're not in need. So we could see things coming, and we knew that we better stay on it or we were going to be in trouble. There are many dental offices around us that we have helped by giving them things. So, I think that just being prepared, and it is a goofy time. We don't know what's around the corner, but trying to anticipate anything we can and then staying on top of it. We've had trainings. We had a big training before we came back, and with everybody in it. And I think that's important.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about training. And if anyone has done anything else, have you all done training on the new protocols since you've reopened your offices? Has everyone gotten that done?
Yes.
And how long did that last in general? Was it like a half a day, a day?
I would say ours was about a half a day. We went over all infection control and just infection control, not OSHA. And we spent about a half a day on that, answering questions and just kind of feeding off each other ideas, going through how we were going to, allow patients to come in and what we were going to do with that, and temperature taking and all that. That was about a half a day for us.
And Rhonda, you also?
Yeah, it was about a half a day. We did like a dry run, and the whole idea of like, what do you do if you encounter this situation? For practices like mine that still have paper charts, we can't take them to the ops anymore. So what do? So we had to do like role playing and kind of get everybody up to speed on how do you take the temperatures with the new, touchless thermometer? How do you, ask these certain COVID questions or just like, how do you keep the patients in their car before their appointment because they're so autopilot to come sit in your waiting room.
Right.
So yeah, it was really helpful and useful. And I think a lot of dentists, got on board with that. I think all of them felt better about talking to their team first before they even took it to their patients and said, these are the measures we're doing.
Gotcha. Well, I'd like to pivot a little bit here, and Kathy, I'll ask you the question first. I think one of the, we hear, and I think one of the things that's really a challenge in this new normal, as it were, is really communicating with patients, right? So we talked a little bit before about the challenge of communicating within the dental team. So Kathy, maybe you can share some ideas that you've come across that have made sense and what coaching you would give as we communicate with patients about the new normal and infection control and all the things. And then we'll get some real world experience also from some of the folks who are working chairside. But if you can kick us off with some great ideas around communicating with patients, that'd be great.
Yes, and it's absolutely essential because, fear is one of those things that keeps patients from us to begin with. So not knowing what to expect is anticipatory and causes some anxiousness. So thank you for allowing me to address this. I will pull on my own experience. My doctor, my dentist, has sent out numerous amounts of communication with us, with our family. We know exactly what to expect when we go in. I actually get to go in next week and have my my prophy done, which I'm really excited about. I know that for me as a patient, there's a certain expectation, even as a dental professional, about my visit to the practice. And I know that in our state, they have requested that we keep the aerosols down. So there are procedures that we are currently not doing in this practice. Guided biofilm therapy would be one of them. So my hygienist will not be able to use that particular machine when I go back in this time. It will be a hand scaling as was done many times before. So that communication process, just giving them the opportunity to know what their path might be. And some of us have a parking lot where our patients can sit in the car and wait till we wave them in. Others have to park in a city parking building and go across up here in Minnesota skyways in order to get to the practice that they have chosen as their happy dental home. So there have been many, many dry runs, and there are greeters at the entrances of the practices, and they've even gone so far as to tell their UPS man, their postal services and things like that, where to drop mail and packages so that they're not bringing things into the practice. So communication, connecting with those patients, and we even provided Zoom meetings if they wanted to attend and say hi to all of us, because we haven't seen them for weeks. So that's where we started.
That's excellent. So from the four who are practicing chair side, not that Kathy hasn't but so recently, but what are some of the tips and tricks and even some of the sentences that you've used with patients to make them feel comfortable? I'd imagine that the good news is we're all blessed, I think, that most patients seem to be coming back willingly and eagerly to a dental appointment. They trust us a lot, and that's great. But there was fear before, now there's other reasons to be fearful. So who can share some ideas of some words and sentences that have worked very well with some of the patients who may be a little more reluctant to come back to the dental office? Anyone have anything? Raise your hand if you have a particularly good story to share. Erin, go ahead.
Of course, I do. So our verbiage, we're lucky in that, like I said, we have always kind of practiced the way that people are pivoting to now. So the verbiage is basically, you'll remember that. You'll remember that we never have anyone in the waiting area. If you remember, whenever you check out, there's never a backup. If you remember, we've always worn the shield. So it's sort of just reminding patients of things that we've been doing, and so they feel very comfortable, and the answer is always, oh, absolutely, and I feel very comfortable. But what I can say is that for the things that people are doing now that maybe they perhaps weren't doing so much before, you can say things like, I had to help somebody recently try to explain to patients what they're doing now. The doctor wanted to go through all the things that he bought and talk about all the new equipment that he bought, to which I said, I don't think a patient really cares what you bought. They want to know how you're going to make them feel safe and comfortable. And so what I said to her was to basically say, we've moved in a direction where we're stepping up what we've done before. We are sanitizing at our front desk more. Now, we happen to sanitize at our front desk and keep a sanitizing log, but just to let patients know that we've always kept up with infection control and OSHA standards, but now we're just taking it a step further. So you might notice that there's a machine now that suctions in your, there's a big machine now that is also clearing out some of the aerosol. You might notice, plexiglass at the front desk where there wasn't before. So verbiage like that, I think, can help patients feel comfortable and safe, and you don't have to necessarily have to say things like, or to make patients feel like you weren't being safe in the first place. Now all of a sudden you want to be safe.
Okay.
But that's just my feeling on it. Just letting patients know in a way that it's not something that's brand new to the office, but you're just taking it a little bit further.
That's great. That's helpful. Rhonda, Tia, John? Rhonda?
So I run the social media for my practice, and I'm big into making videos, as some of you guys have seen me bombard my social medias with all of them. But I make videos, and so I'm like, check out our fresh new look. And so I made a video of our reception area with our plexiglass, and then we have like a fully automated guest bathroom. And just, it's kind of like highlighting, hey, we're not like putting it in your face saying we weren't doing it before, but we're just kind of icing on the cake. Oh, look at this. Look at that hand sanitizing station. Isn't it amazing?
That's awesome. So I think you're sort of on the same lines that Erin is, which is we don't want to give the impression we weren't doing these things before. We want to give the impression is whatever we were doing before was working, and we're making it even better, right? So there's this idea that we're moving forward. So I think that's your Tia. How about from you?
I was just, basically, I completely agree with Erin. We've always followed infection control standards to the highest degree. That's what we do. That's what we specialize in. It's the most important thing we do on a daily basis. We're just taking it up another step to make our patients feel comfortable. I will say it again. I think our dental offices are the most safest places you can be. And so I think, we're just letting our patients know that. And we have, an email text messaging service that we have been communicating with our patients throughout this whole several weeks. And we've actually been open since May 4th, full time. And truly our patients are appreciative. They are understanding, they're cooperative. They are so glad, they're so grateful that we're here and that we're seeing them. And so it's been a very smooth transition. We didn't know what to expect, but it's been so smooth. And it's, it's just great to see patients thanking us that we're here for them. So we really appreciate them.
That's great. And John, how about from you, from the military side? Anything to share, or pretty much you haven't started open full time yet? So
yeah, the biggest thing is just letting your patients know that, hey, if your office was closed, we wanted to be here, because it seems like some of the things I'm reading, some patients are resentful, they couldn't get work done. And you just have to remind them that, unfortunately, we didn't want to close, we were here and we want to be here. And of course, some changes have had to been made, but, like Erin and everyone else reiterated, we've been doing a lot of over and above things in dental as a whole. So not a lot of changes are really happening, but some of it can be a little bit scary. But as long as you communicate and explain things to patients, so far the reception's been really great.
Has anyone had patients cancel, not because they were sick, but because they were too nervous coming in? I haven't heard a lot of stories about that. Has anyone had that happen, or overall pretty much business as usual?
Personally, we just had a couple. We have canceled patients that were high risk, and we put them off just a little bit farther down the road. But I want to say we've just had a couple cancel. It's not been widespread. It's literally a couple of people that have had underlying issues, and they just choose to stay in. Elderly. The two I can think of were elderly patients, and they just chose to stay in a little longer, and that's okay. We had people who were happy to take their spots, and it's just all about getting along and understanding them and having them understand us. But it's been very good.
It's great. Let's pivot a little bit to this idea around how we're changing the schedules in the office to accommodate the higher level of infection control, the PPE, donning and doffing, maybe a little bit longer to break down the rooms and let the aerosols sort of settle in. From the chair side folks out there, how have you adjusted the schedule accordingly? And are you seeing as many patients as you saw pre-COVID, or are you working more hours? How are you accommodating that? And finally, do you feel like you're settling into a rhythm now, or do you feel like it's still a bit of an adventure every day? Rhonda, I'll ask you first. Well, I mean, it's always an adventure, but for post-COVID. Rhonda, I'll ask you first. How do you guys feel the schedule is running in the office, and what new tools and tricks have you adopted into the schedule to make it work better?
So, we in my practice, we've always done rocks, pebbles, sand schedules. And luckily I have 4 operatories. I would say 3 operatories I can do like restorative dentistry out of, and an extra like an overflow for triage and LOEs. But yeah, just, alternating rooms, I start with op 3, I go to 5, I come back to 4, just being smart instead of, at one point, I'm sure every dental assistant, if you've had multiple operatories, but that one's yours, like you want to do everything in the same room because everything's where you have it and it's perfectly set up and you have a creature habit type thing. But that was one of our adaptions is learning how to alternate room use and, schedule smarter, not harder, like do the big stuff in the morning and just kind of break things up so that there's, as far as aerosol producing procedures, we've just kind of done every couple of hours we'll alternate.
Erin, Tia?
Basically, same thing. I have 2 doctors, I have 4 full-time hygienists and 3 restorative rooms. So we've got that 3rd room, we can stagger, we can bounce back and forth and give that 15 minutes in between each patient, that it's all worked out really smooth. I want to say we're probably not scheduling maybe 2 extra patients, a little longer on hygiene, but it's really gone very smooth. So it's not been finding a workflow, finding our groove, I like to say, has not been hard at all. It's been pretty seamless.
Yeah. So I'll add a little commercial here. So not for Benco necessarily, but for something we talk about a lot with our doctors. Oftentimes when doctors come in and they want to talk about building a new facility or changing their facility, we really push them on adding operatories. And I know they look at us and they say, oh, that's a self-serving thing. You just want to sell more equipment. And we keep saying, no, no, no. If you can fit 7, fit 7. Don't stop at 5, because the single best scheduling technique that you can have is more operatories and not having to be rushed between operatories, breaking them down, putting them back together. So maybe now we're going to get a little more attention on that, because I don't know of one office out there in America that wouldn't like to have a few extra operatories right now, especially as it takes more time to change over operatories. Oftentimes the least expensive addition to an office that really bumps up the productivity dramatically is an extra operatory, or 2 or 3. I don't know if anyone has a comment around that. That's a commercial that I'll throw in there, that everybody, however big your office is, a couple extra operatories would be helpful right now, I assume.
And you always want to remember, if you build it, they will come.
I think that's been definitely true from my experience. If you build it, they will come. And a dental office is a little bit like it's a bad example, but it's a little bit like a factory. And a factory definitely is dependent on how much space it has. You can only make so much things depending on the space you have. You can't make 1 million if you only have space to make 100,000. So we have to get people to think more like a dental office, more like that when they're designing dental offices. More operatories is better. And as far as the schedule, raise your hand if anyone on the phone or on the call actually does the scheduling in their office. I guess, John, you do the scheduling. Tia, you work front office. Also, Erin, you do the scheduling as well. Is there anything that's more helpful than extra operatories when you're doing the schedule, right? I mean, that's really what makes the difference, right? Erin, I don't know if you have anything you want to add around that.
Absolutely. Extra operatories are, I think, really essential. I have a friend who is moving their office into another building, and the doctor had enough room for an extra operatory, but he was thinking he didn't want to do it. And she and I convinced him, make the operatory. I don't understand, why would you have just an empty room anyway? If it's going to be empty, make it so that you could possibly use it. So he did get on board and said, okay, yeah, I guess you're right. We could go ahead and make another operatory. Because as assistants in our practice, we make appointments chairside with the patient in the chair. So knowing that if I can deliver a night guard in one operatory and the doctor can be in another operatory doing something else, that's very helpful. Or knowing if I could have someone wait in an operatory, even now with using it as a waiting area, because if some people have small reception areas and you don't want, with social distancing, you can use that other operatory for someone to possibly wait, have a little TV screen on the ceiling.
Yeah, one of the things we're doing at Benco is we're trying to rethink the basic design of dental operatories and dental offices. One of the things we're looking at, and this is maybe a little bit radical, but we see it in other versions of healthcare, is maybe even putting a small waiting area attached to every operatory, as opposed to a larger reception area. In dentistry, we've been very focused on a big enough reception area, but with COVID and social distancing, in other versions of healthcare, what they generally will do is they'll have a waiting area next to each treatment site. So you'd have 7 small waiting rooms as opposed to having one larger waiting room. So we're trying to move the needle. We're trying to stretch things a little bit and think a little bit differently. How can we design a dental office to be more efficient and more productive in a post-COVID-19 world? So these are all things that we're thinking about, and I'm sure you guys are all thinking about it as well. All right, great. John, you have anything you want to add? You look like you had a thought bubble over your head. I just wanted to give you the chance.
No, I don't believe so. I'm just taking all the advice in. It's, as far as the VA, we have 4 pods of 4 operatories. So we have 19 total, but we have 16 that are across from each other. So right now they just have one dentist working out of there. Then they move the patient to the next pod, in hopes of, if they are using the handpiece, by the time they come back, the aerosols will be cleared out. So, as far as scheduling goes, we're seeing well below our capacity. We're used to seeing 150, 200 patients a day.
Wow.
And, they might be topping off at 10 to 15, a day. So as far as the veterans go, it's definitely, being underserved for the moment.
Well, they'll be back at some point. We're very confident of that, and you'll be slammed. So we'll see
Absolutely.
how that goes. So to pivot over to some of the Q&A, I would like to just ask a couple questions that seem to be on the minds of our watchers and listeners today. The first one I'd like to ask is, someone asked, what is the training, the specific training that the term I use was Safety Czar. Others have used OSHA coordinator or infection control coordinator. But what are some of the trainings that you all think that person in the dental practice should be sure to have? Erin, do you want to go first on any specific training that you'd recommend?
I would recommend that that person do an OSAP training. Recently there was a big convention, an OSAP convention, and so I would recommend whoever your OSHA coordinator czar person is, they have that training, because they will learn an awful lot. That training, coupled with whomever your outside OSHA training representative is, just to really be up close and personal with them and be trained with them. Those two, I think, are really, really good resources to make sure that you don't become misinformed and then in turn misinform your team members. So those are two of the resources that I would recommend.
Great. Tia, Rhonda, John, Kathy, other suggestions?
Well, I think Erin hit the nail on the head. The Organization for Safety, Asepsis, and Prevention, osap.org, is an amazing organization, and they do nothing but dental office infection control. If you're the infection control person in your office, they have certification that you can take to become certified in infection control, and they work with the Dale Foundation on that. And that's so important. I always like to say, you don't know what you don't know. And so there's so much misinformation out there, and this organization is there to train you on just that. And so dive in, take the training. If that's your position in the office, or you want that to be your position in the office, they have a boot camp every January, I won't miss. And they have an annual session every summer. And so training, education, I can't stress that enough. Get educated on what your responsibilities are if you want to be the best at them. So I think that, education. So
and I'll just build on, and I think you're right, Tia, and I'll just build on that and say proactive. In other words, if you're the infection control person, then go out and find it. I think sometimes we all have a tendency to sort of wait till the boss says, here's what to do, or something like that. But I think what you identified as osap.org has a lot of resources. There are other resources you can find. Of course, make sure it's trustworthy resources. You don't want to go find something that's wrong. But I think what you're advocating for is stand up and own it. Take control of the position and really make sure that you're as educated as you can be and up to speed on things. Another one that I'd recommend is there's a lot of information, and I think sometimes people are intimidated by it, at the CDC's website. I think people think, oh, it's the CDC, it's government, it's hard to understand. And I have found the CDC website to be very helpful on recommendations, very readable, very understandable. And if you're looking for one final source of truth, I would argue that the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, is probably as close as you're going to get. So in addition to osap.org, I'd recommend the cdc.gov website.
Recommend the CDC.
Okay.
And the CDC has an app, actually.
Yes, oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the CDC has an app. It's not all that in a bag of chips, but it's a great place to start.
Great.
So you can
Good. That's a good one. Yes, Rhonda. Oh, Rhonda, showing off the social media chops. Go ahead.
No.
You're on mute, though.
Yeah.
Rhonda, you're on mute. Can I try again?
No, it's just the app. I was trying
Okay.
to show you guys what the app looks like.
Right.
Awesome. That's
Right
the CDC
there.
app? Excellent. Okay, good.
It's
All right, so
backwards, but it says dental check.
got it. All right, so everyone should download the CDC app. I think that's a great idea. And the ADA is trying to up their game a little bit. I think they've done some work, some good work the last few weeks. I think they were a bit behind some of the other ones, actually. That's great. All right, thank you. So another question that came in is, I think everybody's a little confused, but just to verify, everybody on this call who uses an N95 mask has been fit tested for an N95 mask, correct?
Absolutely.
All
It's
right.
a must.
And
Must. Go ahead, Tia.
Yeah, and you're fit tested, but there's a medical evaluation and that you have to have. Don't skip that step because.
Can you explain the why? Explain, because I think people think,
why?
oh, another government regulation. What's the why
Right.
behind it?
The why is because not everybody can wear it. It's very restrictive. If you have, asthma, if you have COPD, if you have high blood pressure, you're not going to be able to wear this mask. It's very restrictive. And not only are we wearing the N95, but we're putting a level 3 on top of it, which makes it even more so. And truly, your body's not getting the oxygen that it needs. And we're finding dental assistants or doctors and hygienists, they're getting weak, they're getting dizzy, they're passing out, all these things because they're not being able to breathe. And one of the misconceptions behind that is they're putting it on in the morning when they come in and they're taking it off at noon. And then they're putting it on after lunch and they're taking it off. And that N95 is meant to be worn around aerosol procedures, not 24/7.
Right.
And so it's making us sick. It's making dental personnel sick because they're not wearing it properly. They're wearing it too long. So give your body a break, but truly not everybody can wear this. And again, I'm really big on documentation, and you need that medical evaluation form, and it should be a part of your employee file.
So one of the things I'll put a commercial in for is on the product side, I love N95 masks, but we've already seen a number of options that I think will go beyond the N95 mask. I tend to agree with Tia. They're hard to breathe through, they're hard to wear. So we're looking at a number of options, and we won't be the only ones, of what's called a PAPR. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but basically it's a helmet. Think of it as a welder's helmet with a filter and actually a positive pressure, meaning it blows the air into the helmet. And we think that going forward, even by the end of the year, maybe even the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to see a number of options come on the market. They're not going to be, they're expensive in that they're like $1,000, but when you consider the cost of the N95 mask, maybe not that expensive, where we really envision that in the not too distant future, the only risk is sort of scaring the patients a little bit, but it's just a bit of a learning curve. But basically the idea would be everybody gets a helmet, a welder's mask kind of thing that combines the face shield. You don't have to wear a mask because it's sealed and there's a pipe and basically a filter, and therefore there's no trouble breathing, right? So you don't have to breathe through something because the filter is maybe at your belt or behind your head. It's filtered air. The only filtered air gets into the mask, into this container, this helmet, and then out, then it blows out once you're done. So we're very excited about that because I think Tia identified a number of the challenges with an N95 mask, starting with they are bloody hard to wear all day, and as Rhonda said before, they have to be thrown away every visit. So we are very excited about those options going forward. And that's going to change the way we look in the profession, but I think they may actually provide a better experience.
It's
Some of
really
us may have to cut our hair. Erin, you may have to cut your hair going forward, or put it in a bun, but I think going forward, I think everybody would think that's a better option. Kathy, you were going to say something?
Yes, and it's hard to communicate through those
Yes.
95 masks to get,
Very much.
if you're talking
They
to people
can't,
about
yeah.
treatment options and financial
Right.
situations, it's very, very difficult to communicate through the masks. So
The one that we've seen that actually is coming over for medical is almost like a welder's mask, but it seals around the head, and then you can flip up the front when you want to communicate. So that would be, I wear it flip down when I'm in an operatory, when there's a chance of cross-contamination. When I leave the operatory, I can flip it up. I can have a conversation over the front desk, socially distanced, of course, but basically I'm flipping it down when I'm doing chair side. I'm flipping it up when I'm not. So everybody should stay calm. I truly believe that where we are now from a PPE perspective is probably just the second or third inning of a baseball game. You know, we're sort of in the beginning of it. We're figuring out how to fight an airborne pathogen. And trust me when I tell you, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's going to come down in the next couple of months around air quality, air filtration, different kinds of masks, different kinds of PPE that will really make a difference. Right now, we're sort of in the beginning of it. And
it's kind of that hierarchy of control, like I was talking about earlier.
Exactly.
And then when we get down to the PPE, that's our last barrier.
Right.
So when we can up that game, that's going to benefit everybody.
Make a huge
From an
difference.
emotional standpoint as well as from a
Yeah.
physical standpoint.
I think everybody's a little stressed, but it's going to get better as we go. For those of us who remember what it was like to go through the late 80s, early 90s and the bloodborne pathogens, well, we can tell you, and I'll say I was there. The rest of you can self-identify as having gone through it, or you can deny it. I was there. As those of us who were there will tell you, it took about 6 months to a year. But one thing that I'm very proud to say, and it's kind of a good place to sort of leave our discussion today. I think those of us who went through the bloodborne pathogen chapter of dentistry remember that Dr. Acer's office in Florida was the epicenter of the AIDS epidemic and the crisis. So dentistry was really front and center. It was a tragic story. The dentist at the time was later, I think, rightfully accused of deliberately infecting patients. But once dentistry geared up for bloodborne pathogens, what I can say is in the ensuing 20 years, I don't know of one story where there was cross-contamination due to bloodborne pathogens at a dental office, right? Not one. So as we all got geared up to the bloodborne pathogens, dentistry rose to the occasion, and our success story since that one incident has been stellar. And so I'm very confident that once we all get geared up for airborne pathogens, we should have a very similar outcome. And I'm very excited about that. I think that's what makes our profession so great. So with that, we're almost at the very end of our hour. Whoever wants to raise their hand and have the last word, we have about 2 minutes. I'll give whoever wants the last word. If not, I'm going to call on somebody. Rhonda, do you want to give us the last word? God, you're so upbeat and bubbly and social media oriented. So why don't you take the last word and then we'll call it a session.
Okay, I do like talking. So I said
that wasn't what I said.
I'm a big
I said
fan.
you're bubbly, and I could see you had a thought you wanted to share. So go ahead.
You know, for any dental assistants that are watching this, and say you're the rock star dental assistant, right? You're going above and beyond. You're watching a webinar focusing on our career field. If you see a dental assistant struggling, you know, say they're on the verge of leaving the career field because either they're scared, they're undereducated, or they just don't feel supported, go out there and reach out to them. Say, you know what, I'm one of you. Let's, you know, what are your fears, your anxieties? How do I work through it? Just share with these guys. I know, I think every panelist can agree with that. Is like, it's kind of our job as the elders to, you know, be a guiding light for the younger generation of dental assistants and kind of setting the standards really high as far as what you expect them to get out of their career and contribute back to the dental profession. And let them know that, you know, if you're scared, that's okay, but just come to me when you have questions. I'm your peer. I just, you know, I think we need to kind of not coddle, but support our younger dental assistants that maybe don't have the same kind of education we do yet, and just give them a support.
And I would just want to throw in there really quick. I know that there's questions we didn't get to, and as this is on demand and people, you know, watch it tomorrow, next week, next month, as questions come in, I believe, I'll speak for all of us, but I believe if you forward those to us, we'll be more than happy to answer and to help any way we can. So I didn't want people to feel like we couldn't get to them. We only had an hour, but hopefully we'll do this again. Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. And thank you everybody for participating today. We had 5 fabulous panelists. I'm going to turn things over to Kay to draw us to a close. Thank you once again for everyone who attended, and thank you again to our 5 Rockstar panelists. Thank you for being here. Kay, turn it over to you.
Thank you. You guys did a great job, but I didn't expect less, right? I mean, when I called each one of you, it was amazing. And this is what I will say. Yes, we do want your questions. And if you're watching this video later, if you will email us at practicecoaching@benco.com. Again, that's
I don't know if Kay dropped off. I didn't hear her after a while. So practicecoaching@benco.com. And with that, we're going to say thank you very much, everybody, for being here today. Have a great rest of the week. And thanks for being in dentistry. Have a great day. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.